Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Coffee with the Critters. We've been live streaming this every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. We've been doing this every Sunday morning for the past 3 years. So I want to give a huge shout out to everybody who is a new follower and has been following us for the whole 3 years. My name is Laura Joseph. Hello, my name is Laura Joseph, owner of the Animal Behavior Center. We are an international educational center teaching people across the world about living, loving, and learning with animals using applied behavior analysis and positive reinforcement. And we do that through our live streaming services, which you can find more on our website at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. Good morning, everybody. Hey Eva, hey Mary, hey Lydia. Welcome, everybody. Hope everybody had a great Father's Day and looking forward to 4th of July. So for those of you that may not be familiar with us, here on our Facebook page, if you look to the left, there will be an events section, and we have the events scheduled for Coffee with the Critters. You can see every topic through the end of July, but we have everything planned out until the end of the summer. And we bring you topics, Q&As, where we have very interactive Q&As where we can bring you on screen with us now. So do your hair on Sunday mornings. We also have, like today, we have guest professional dog trainer Kim Silver out of Tucson, Arizona with Building Bonds. So I will invite different guests, different trainers, and different experts across the world. So pay attention, stay tuned, and we'll bring different topics. I have a lot more in there. I'm just drawing a blank. Good morning, everybody. So yes, I'm feeling a lot better than I was last weekend. Good morning, Jennifer. Good morning, Sandy. So for those of you just joining, that may not have heard the intro, my name is Laura Joseph, owner of the Animal Behavior Center. We are an international educational center teaching people across the world about living, loving, and learning with animals using applied behavior analysis and positive reinforcement. I used to hesitate using the word applied behavior analysis because it sounds, a lot of people are like, oh, this is too sciencey, it's too much for me. What we do here is we put applied behavior analysis into everyday understandable terms for every household, every facility across the world. All right, so let me go ahead and get started and bring in, let me get my agenda off of here, bring in our guest, Kim Silver, who is waiting in the lobby. There she is.
Morning.
Kim. Thanks for joining me. I know it's early for you.
Yes, happy to be here.
Okay, so this is Kim Silver. Before I introduce how we met, Kim, do you want to tell everybody a little bit about yourself and about what you do and your company, your organization, Building Bonds Training?
Yeah, I'm a professional dog trainer in Southern Arizona. I have a training center in Tucson, Building Bonds. I'm a Karen Pryor certified training partner. And when we went through that program, anybody who goes through that program has to train another species in addition to a dog. And I had recently adopted my blue-fronted Amazon Oliver. And so that was my first experience in training another species. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me. So it's been a really fun journey over the last 3 years to work with other animals. And I'm really broadening my horizons with what kinds of animals I can work with. So it's really cool to meet you the way that we did and to get to know you and be part of what you do at the Animal Behavior Center. It's cool.
Yay, great. Well, good. I didn't know that one of the requirements was to train an animal of another species.
Yes.
That's pretty smart. Because, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing this live stream this morning, connecting the dots in ABA through an array of different species from domestic to exotic. And that's how the Animal Behavior Center started, was using ABA with numerous different species. And one of the ways that I started, Kim, which was one of the best things I could have done, was volunteer at a wildlife rehab center, because there's all the native species, you know what I mean? So here I was, when I was taking the master's classes in applied behavior analysis, I was like, all right, I'd study, and then I'd set down my books and head out to the rehab center, Nature's Nursery here in White House, Ohio, and see how it worked on a turkey vulture, and then turn around and see how it worked with a squirrel, turn around, see how it worked with a whatever, you know, all these different species. And the animals have been my best trainers. And I tell people, a lot of people will ask me, what's the toughest animal you've ever trained? And it, hands down, I'm not lying, and I'm not trying to be funny, but it is people, you know? It's, the animals are easier to train. But if we're speaking about non-human animals, I'm like, you really want to fine tune your training. Train a wild, non-releasable raptor. Yeah, because they want nothing to do with you. You know, they want to get as far away from you as possible. So being able to work with reinforcers or identify, that'll really fine tune your skills in identifying reinforcers and using them. So Kim, let's talk about a little bit about how we met, because I've only known you for a couple of months.
Yeah.
So I was asked to be a presenter and give some workshops through the Pet Professional Guild out at Best Friends Animal Society in Utah, and that was at the end of April. I agreed. I've been writing for PPG for a couple of years now, and that is where I met you.
Yep.
So how long have you been? Are you a member of PPG?
I am a member of PPG. I think about 2 years now. And I've never been to one of their summits, which they normally have in Florida every year. And I've been chomping at the bit to go to one because the presenters they have are amazing. And I happen to be a volunteer for Best Friends Animal Sanctuary. Oh,
you are?
Yeah, it's about a 7.5-hour drive from where I live. So the PPG summit that I went to was probably my 6th or 7th visit to the sanctuary, and my parrot is from there. I adopted him from there. So when they announced the summit, I was giddy happy and signed up, I think, the day that they announced it. And I was really looking forward to meeting you because, you know, parrots, because I now have one, are a big study of mine in recent years. So it was a really exciting experience for me at the summit in general. It was great across the board, but I really enjoyed your workshop and watching you interact with the birds and learning from you. It was a great experience.
Thanks. Yeah, so when I gave 2 presentations, and then I had a workshop to give every day, and I was asked to give the workshop on parrots. So when we started, I had never met these parrots before, and we were trying to pick the right candidates. And we kind of fumbled around which ones were the right candidates. And it's all about picking the right candidate for the job at the time. And that one, a lot of times when I give workshops for working with exotics or parrots, you want to start with those that are not afraid of people, because it's not that the ones that are afraid of people you can't work with. You can, but it may not be the best learning experience for the viewer, because all those small, subtle steps you have to take just to bring the parrot out to that area. So I did tell them out there, I was like, I would like to work with a parrot that is labeled as aggressive, but let's do that via off contact or protective contact. And that was Sunshine.
Yeah, that was so cool to watch.
Yeah.
The that you were doing with Sunshine. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really cool because they didn't think Sunshine had any hope of being adopted. He had been there for 9 years, and I was just like, absolutely, this bird definitely has potential of being adopted. Several of the animals we have here, those are the reasons we have them here, is because that was Coco that came to us from a zoo. We've got a couple different ones out there that would bite you in a heartbeat, and that's primarily out of pushing the animal past its comfort level, not being able to adequately read that behavior, what that behavior looks like. But anyways, the different birds that we did work with, and it wasn't just birds that people had the opportunity to work with out there. It was Shrug was working with
Pigs.
Vicky was working with the tortoises.
Mm-hmm.
Janice was working with the dogs. Emily was working with the bunnies.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then Jennifer was working with the cats. So people they got that opportunity to pick those different workshops throughout the week. But one of the things that when the birds were brought out, before we even started interacting with them, was identifying aversives. Quickly identifying aversives, things that the animal doesn't like. And one of those that I had pointed out that I think may not be so obvious is the wind blowing at the bird's back. Ruffles up the feathers, knocks the bird off balance. You're standing there, it's paired with you, not setting yourself up for success. So let's talk about that a little bit, Kim. Identifying reinforcers of desired, undesired behavior, identifying common aversives and individual aversives. Let's just start diving in. What array of animals have you worked with?
I have a friend that has some goats. So I had an opportunity to work with her goats once. I've worked with cats. Honestly, when I first started with Karen Pryor Academy training another species, I attempted a cat. I abandoned ship. This cat isn't for me. The cat I was having a difficult time back then finding reinforcers for the cat. The cat was not interested in anything I had to offer. So it was a learning experience for me that the animal gets to decide what's reinforcing. We don't get to decide that. And I have people ask me all the time, well, what kind of treat should I use for my dog? And, I have dogs that work for broccoli. They love vegetables. And so, it's not always what we think that the animal would like. They have to tell us that they like it. And sometimes praise, our voice. I know you talk about this a lot, using that really jollied up kind of excitement for an animal, especially a parrot, can be very reinforcing. So it's a little bit of trial and error, trying to figure out what floats their boat. And I know from listening to you, what you often do is look at what they eat in their regular meals and finding, what the animal might pick out first and go, aha, that's their favorite. And so then you don't get that in their meal anymore. You save that, for the training session that you might do with them so that it has more value to the animal.
Yeah. And a lot of times, let's talk about this, the wide variety of reinforcers, also in correlation with the behavior that you're working on, because I've worked with animals that if you can work with a food reinforcer, you're good to go. But a lot of times these animals are looking at you like, I'm not working for food. Nope, that is not of interest to me right now. So then you just start struggling, and not struggling in a bad way, but you start being creative and pulling anything out of the environment. Will you work for this? Is this of interest? And you just start making all these different offerings until you see what the animal's, what's of value to it at that particular second.
Right. With dogs, especially working with dogs who are fearful or reactive, and their stress is so high that they won't take food, but they might sniff. So allowing the dog to be able to go and sniff, that's reinforcing for the dog. And from the people point of view, the pet parent point of view, when you were saying earlier how it can be most challenging to train the people, and having the pet parents, kind of understand that this is reinforcing for their dog. It might be annoying to them. I want my dog to pay attention to me on leash, but instead he's sniffing. But at that point in time, that's reinforcing for the dog. So use it to your advantage, especially if the dog won't take food.
Yeah. When I take our Rottweiler out for walks, if I tried to use food as a reinforcer, she, a lot of times she'll look at me like, nope, I am so much more interested in everything else. So if she starts sniffing the ground, what I do is, this is using applied behavior analysis, environmental events to control behavior. I pick the widest path possible. And so that opportunity to sniff are at distances. And then I start shaping, walk so many feet, bridge, go sniff. Walk so many feet, bridge, go sniff, and get that distance longer and longer. And the value of the reinforcer can increase to the amount of time they're sniffing something. Mm-hmm. Bigger behavior, bigger reinforcer.
Right.
So I know, Kim, that you are also, since I met you out at PPG, you joined our level 2 membership, and I'm excited to have you in there, especially being a professional dog trainer. Most people in our level 2, we have a variety of memberships, but most people in our level 2 are seriously interested in applied behavior analysis, or thinking about going into the field of working with animals and behavior, or are already in that field. So it's fun having you in there. And I see a couple other people on here that are level 1 members, level 2 members. But something I wanted to say, I don't know if Pat's in here, but she attended this live stream this past Wednesday. I went live in level 2 from a zoo, and you guys saw me struggle with this particular animal, a ganon. And this is a monkey that I had worked with about 2 years ago. And all of my training was off contact because this animal was labeled as, didn't like women. Okay. I don't know what that looks like. So, but what I did know is if I tried to reinforce his behavior with food, with my fingers, I would get all types of vocalizations. I didn't know what they were at the time. I do now through training. And this is exactly what I did is I started off contact via target training. And I had to deliver a food reinforcer, which was a blueberry via tongs, because if my fingers came into the equation, I would quickly get lunged at or get vocalizations that I was associating with pushing the animal past its comfort point. But I haven't seen this monkey in at least a year. I want to say I haven't worked with her in 2 years, but I used to have to deliver her Cheerios. I trained I trained him to station on a stump with a PVC pipe, delivering Cheerios down a PVC pipe. And then that PVC pipe became a conditioned reinforcer. Every time she would see that PVC pipe, she then ran to her station. But this past Wednesday was my first time training her, and people saw me struggle where I was trying to reinforce with food. She was not taking any of it, but she was giving these grooming behaviors, which myself and if Pat's not in here, she's in level 2 as well. She's an anthropologist and anthrozoologist. She was saying that this monkey is showing social behaviors such as grooming, but I wasn't going to reach in and touch her. But what ended up happening is I was struggling to find a food reinforcer because that's what I had worked with her in the past. And she was clearly telling me no to the blueberries, no to the Cheerios, no to all these food reinforcers. So what I started doing is I saw what I thought was curiosity. So I looked in my training bag for anything that was a tactile object. And I pulled out, I think I took my package of gum and ripped the cardboard paper in half, and I showed it to her. And then she started looking at me and she's like, she started giving me these sounds of interest. So I took it off in pieces and I handed it to her, and she would smell it and put it down. But that was a reinforcer for her to interact with me. Mm-hmm. And then once I started doing this and I was handing it to her via my hands, so she started touching my hands. And then I pulled out the target stick, and then we started work. And it was just, she wanted that interaction. I saw curiosity. She wanted that interaction. And then once we started doing that, that's what you see in these photos, is then she started working. And then she gave me the nose target here that you see, the hand target. And she did, once she started doing that and we interacted via that curiosity, then she started working for food. So it was just like this. That was probably one of the coolest live streams I had ever done.
Amazing.
So that's just an example of reinforcers aren't always food. Mm-hmm. And using environmental events to create behavior, control behavior, modify behavior.
And create trust too with the trainer.
Yes.
That animal you were just talking about is trying to make that connection with you, wants to make the connection, but is uncertain about how. And so you facilitated that for the monkey. And then once the monkey trusted the situation and you, was able to move forward and work with you. So that's...
Yeah. And that was teamwork, because that was her. I mean, training is teaching, teaching is communication. That was her teaching me. And I learned from her that day. I was like, all right, I got it. We're in this together. It's just not me training you.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So some of the other things, like you had said, when you're working with a dog that is very stressed, a lot of times they're not going to take food from you. So the opportunity to sniff. So what are some other situations, Kim, that you found yourself in where food is not going to be a reinforcer? So start thinking a little more outside the box.
Yeah, I tend to go to kind of fearful scenarios, fearful examples, because that's the kind of dogs that I tend to have those situations with. Space is another thing that you can give a dog. So whether they're fearful of people or they're fearful of other dogs, the environment, cars, bicycles, that sort of thing, using space as a reinforcer. So allowing them to create distance between them and what causes them stress so that they feel safe. Because I think a lot of times it's a matter of safety for these animals too. Being uncertain in a situation, being uncertain with the environment, if it's a person in it, the other person at the end of the leash sometimes if they don't know them. So I think allowing animals to have space is really important. And then sometimes even offering affection can be reinforcing for some animals, you know, petting them, talking to them in a happy kind of cheerful voice can work for some animals. You know, it's just different for each one, but everybody's got something, right?
Yeah.
To problem solve it when you're there with the animal and, you know, not give up because there's something that's going to be reinforcing for them.
Sure. And a lot of people sometimes, well, some people, they enter this interaction with the animal, no matter what the species is the animal needs to do this because this is what I want it to do. Uh-huh. And that's really common in companion dogs, in the companion dog world, is it not?
Yes. And I do think sometimes too, we as trainers can get a little caught up in talking about the reinforcement and talking about consequences, but not explaining enough to people how the environmental setup is so important. And sometimes just the environmental setup can impact the animal's behavior. You get a different behavior from the animal.
So explain to us what you're talking about, environmental setup.
I'll use a dog example. I have a client who has a very large property, front and back, fully fenced, but it's on a busy road. And, you know, her dog is fearful, afraid to be outside, afraid of sounds of traffic, especially like big semi trucks. Their home is along a bike path, so people going by on bicycles, walking dogs. She was being reactive at that fence line. So rather than, go through a very time-consuming kind of behavior modification plan in terms of training, the pet parents decided to fence off an interior part of their yard and create a smaller yard for the dog so that she didn't have access without permission to go freely to that bike path fence line or the front yard where, the vehicles are driving by and causing her a lot of stress. And almost immediately, that animal's behavior changed. This was a dog who wouldn't want to spend time outside. In almost 3 years, they've never seen her have a bowel movement.
Wow.
She does it under, cover. She's spending more time outside, going out there and relaxing and just sitting, which before she would never do. The reactivity has stopped. She doesn't have the opportunity to go to those fence lines and do that. And there was also another issue with some inner dog aggression in the house with the other dogs because she was redirecting on them when she was stressed in those situations. So it was just an environmental setup and a good recall cue. That was really all that we did. And this dog is so much happier. The stress is lowered. Yeah. So sometimes those environmental things that we can do for the dogs make any animal actually can make a lot of difference. My parrot, I've learned a lot from him about setting up his cage. He was cage bound for his entire life. He was hatched by a breeder / hoarder. And basically never left his cage. And in nearly a year and a half at Best Friends, had only left his cage once. Didn't know how to step up. So, you can see I have a perch that is outside his cage door, and the door is open. So there's opportunity for him to come out, whenever he wants. He's no longer cage bound. And that's really all I did. A little bit of luring to get him to be interested in coming out, and then fading the lure out. And oftentimes if I come and sit here at my desk, that's a cue for him to come out to the perch. But just making it easy for him to have a place to go. And there's reinforcement there in his little feed cup too. So he gets reinforced when he comes out. But it's just another example of another animal just setting up the environment to get the behavior that you want. For him, it's just exiting his cage.
Yeah. And a lot of times that's what we talk about in the memberships and the projects. What is applied behavior analysis? Using environmental events to control behavior. And that's a perfect example. And when working with parrots specifically, a lot of times people see the behavior of, there's a whole lineup that happens. The animal comes out of the cage. Usually the person doesn't understand the behavior, not able to read the body language / behavior, pushing the animal past its comfort point. The person gets bit. The person is now afraid because they say the animal bit for no reason, which there's always a reason. So the bird goes back to the cage, spends long periods of time in the cage, now starts becoming cage bound, is labeled as aggressive when approaching the cage. And the longer the animal's in the cage without a changing environment, the more the behavior issues start to skyrocket. Very common in the parrot world. I know we were just talking in the parrot project these past couple of months about nesting behaviors. 'Tis the season. You know what I mean? And people a lot of times don't understand, cannot identify what those behaviors are, such as on the ground, pulling up the cage grate papers. There's a lot of things, going into dark areas. A lot of people give boxes as enrichment, big boxes that the bird can go into, and depending on the situation, I'm always like, be very careful with that because, but they're like, yeah, but my bird is busy. And I was like, it sure is busy. And you're going to feel the repercussions of it probably pretty soon. If not, and this can happen among numerous different species is we may be reinforcing an undesired behavior, which induces a lot of frustration and anxiety in the animal. And a lot of these animals, when you start, I'm sure it's a lot with domestic, but it's very common with exotics, is you get these, you reinforce frustration, and it can turn into abnormal repetitive behaviors, self-injurious behaviors with birds, feather destructive behaviors, mutilation. So yeah, I mean, identifying reinforcers, you can reinforce desired behavior and you can easily reinforce undesired behavior, which is probably the number one reason why animals lose their homes.
Right.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, I had worked here at the center with a dog with such high anxiety that it was months before I ever saw the dog defecate. It took weeks before the dog would even drink water in front of me.
Wow.
And I did use a lot of space, give the dog a lot of space. But anyways, Melinda, she's a level 2 member as well. She says it's pretty cool how many similarities exotics and companion animals have when it comes to behavior modification. Yes, exactly.
When I adopted Oliver, I admittedly went through a bit of a panic phase. When I first brought him home, he wouldn't eat. I thought he was going to just starve himself to death. I was ready to put him back in the car and take him back to best friends and say he's not happy here. A bird friend of mine, Melody Hennig, out of the Medical Center for Birds, she talked me off the ledge. Lovely girl sent me pictures of bird poop saying, when his poop starts to look like this, you're in a good place. And then Vicky Ronchetti, I was even reaching out to her about his nails and, kind of like, I have to trim his nails. And finally, Melody said to me, you know what to do. You have the tools for everything that you want to accomplish with him. You do it with dogs already. It's the same principles. You just need to apply it to him. And I was like, thank you for saying that to me, because it took all the stress away with this species that I was unfamiliar with, really, other than reading about them, not having one in front of me, and then now having real life problems, in front of me that I felt like I needed to solve, and I needed to solve it today. And I finally said, he's going to be with me till the day I die, probably. I have all the time in the world, and he's very fearful and very shy to apply the things that I already know, using positive reinforcement, using applied behavior analysis to get him to where I'd like him to be, which is a bird that's not stressed and afraid of people, and can just, come out of his cage and feel safe. And in 3 years' time, I've gotten there with him. There's so much more that I want to do with him. But using the tools that I already had, and giving him the time, the space, the distance that he needed from me, reading that body language from him, and not pushing him too far too fast. And like you said about that dog, giving the distance. I struggle when I hear people say, they don't know that they're flooding, but you just got to get the animal to get used to the situation by putting them in it. And it's like, I just want to scream and say, no,
right.
You're going to set them back.
Yeah. Just for some people that are watching that may not understand flooding, showing an animal a feared object with no opportunity to escape. It's going back to like when we were children, teach them how to swim, throw them in. You know what I mean? It may work. Obviously, there's a reinforcer there behind doing it because it's worked for somebody in the past. It may work for you, but for me, the child being thrown in the pool could also, bam, now I have a huge fear of water that's going to take me months, years, whatever to get over, which I do have, of water that I cannot see through. And yes, that's how I was taught to swim.
And the thing is, whoever threw you in the pool, you know, they got what they needed accomplished. And so that's reinforcing for the person throwing you in the pool. That's reinforcing for the person on the other end of the leash, you know, putting that dog into that difficult situation because they think they're getting the job done. And they may or may not be, but the trauma, you know, that the learner is experiencing, it can be life lasting. And once they're imprinted with that, you know, it's challenging to get a different emotional response from them down the line if they're ever in a similar situation.
Yeah. And when we were talking about your bird, Oliver, when you first brought him home, and Melody saying, Kim, you can do this. You already have the tools. I see a lot of people stumble with that when they're like, I don't know how to approach this. And I was just like, close your eyes, you know what I mean? And pretend that, take the animal away, just focus on their behavior. Now open your eyes. How would you approach this? And that, Kim, here is a lot of what we do. And that's why we do it here. I could have easily called this place the Avian Behavior Center, which I almost did. But then I was just like, you know, I'm working with such an array of different animals. Why would I limit people's opportunity to learn from multiple species versus just even though the birds are great educators. The birds are great educators because you push them, they're going to do one of several things. They're going to fly 50 feet up into the rafters and you're not going to get them back down. They're going to bite you, or they may shut down. You know what I mean? They're going to stop. They're going to stop interacting because no matter how they try to control their environment, they're learning that they have no control of their consequences. And of the three I just listed, that is probably the most sad. You know what I mean? So Shelley had said here, Shelley Hotstetler, she's another level 2 member. She had said every animal can benefit from if you're actually using positive reinforcement training. And I had never saw myself as being a trainer, Kim. I never had the desire to be a trainer. I always loved animals. What got me into training and going back to school, taking master's level classes in applied behavior analysis was empowering the animal, taking animals from situations and just boom, you've got the power. You know, we can live together. I am not going to force you. We can do this. I can trim your nails without having to force you, with you wanting to come up and give me your nails. It's the whole way of interacting, communicating, living, loving, and learning.
When you were talking about naming your business, I rebranded my business a few years ago. It used to be Kim's Canine College when I first started dog training. And I decided to rebrand it. And the reason behind it was that I didn't want to limit myself to just dogs. And if you look at my website, you know, you've got it up there. My logo has a dog and a bird in it. And if you go through my website, it's all about dogs because I haven't, you know, officially branched out to other species yet. But when I rebranded a few years ago and I chose that new logo, it was because I wanted to be able to eventually train other animals and work with birds and work with cats and work with pigs and work with horses, you know. And so I connect with you on that and how it is about building the bond, you know, between us and an animal, regardless of species. So that was an interesting story for me to hear from you. Yeah.
Yeah. And in speaking about, why limit yourself? I mean, these animals are such great teachers.
Yes.
You know, like I said, you want to really fine tune your skills. Honestly, Kim, train a non-releasable raptor.
Yeah. Well, we have a wildlife rehab center here in Tucson. One of my clients actually is a volunteer there. I'm going to have to pick her brain on getting out there and doing that. It's an excellent idea that you talked about at the beginning of the live.
Yeah, I know Vicky Ronchetti has since started, since I've known her, she started working at a wildlife, or well, volunteering at a wildlife rehab center. Um, so something you had touched on, Kim, that I want to go back to, because learning through an array of different species, where we're talking domestic, undomesticated, native, non-native, there's something, and I used to say this when I first opened the center, I was just like, you can learn a lot from training prey animal now. Prey things like birds, pigs, rabbits, things that get eaten because they show behaviors. You push them past their comfort level, you're going to see all these subtleties so much quicker. Something that is afraid of you or afraid of people in general, afraid of other animals. Something like we have here in the center, some of the animals that we have here, raptors, parrots, pigs, dogs, fish, and then we'll take in different zoo animals. And a lot of times, I mean, one of the best pieces of advice that I could give anybody, there's two that really are 50-50, but the one that I jump to the most is keep your animal used to change.
Uh-huh.
And that is why last year, this time, I was speaking out in Seattle, and I've always wanted to see Seattle. And I was like, look at this beautiful country, and I got to go home. But I had the opportunity to stay out there and go whale watching with some friends. And I really wanted to, Kim, but that is when, I don't know, we have Snow, our deaf and blind border collie.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It was her first summer with us, and July 4th was approaching.
Oh, yeah.
And I could have been selfish and stayed in Seattle and had everybody here just take care of the effects of July 4th. But I was like, here's a dog that is going to have her first 4th of July, cannot see and cannot hear, but she can feel. I mean, the vibrations she picks up on. So, my husband was like, stay out there, have fun. And the night before, I was like, nope, I'm going home. Because if I want to be with her on 4th of July, and we sat here in the backyard and the neighborhood fireworks were going off, and every single time she would feel that boom, that vibration, I would drop popcorn on her head. And so she was, then throughout the night, she'd feel the fireworks go off and start looking on the ground for the popcorn, versus why I was negatively reinforced coming back, because I wanted to avoid any behavior issues that I wouldn't have the opportunity to retrain.
Right.
With her first experience.
Mm-hmm.
So identifying aversives. I mean, one of the first things I do with any animal, and that's why I love training zoo animals and non-releasable native wildlife, is because there's such a diversity of different animals there. But one of the first things I do when I start interacting with an animal is I just observe. I just sit back and I watch. And I don't, because if I'm not familiar with that animal and I go up and start interacting, if I do not understand their behavior, their body language that they're showing me, I could be pairing myself with an aversive immediately. But I don't know, because I don't know what this means, or I don't know what means, So there, I'm not setting myself up for success. So I will stand back and just watch, and I'll watch what that animal move towards and what it moves away from. Everything it moves towards, I'm like potential positive reinforcer that I can take and virtually stick in my pocket and deliver for behaviors I want to see increase. I watch things it moves away from. If it freezes, I'm just like, I'm always looking around. What just caused you to do that? Because whatever that is, I'm going to remove it. And if whatever that thing is that I remove, if that needs to be a part of that animal's environment, I remove it and then I just shape it back in. So one of the other things that we do here is because our center is full of animals that either have a history of, have a history or reinforcement of people unknowingly training undesired behaviors, or fearful animals. So keep your animal used to change. That is something that needs to be shaped. You can't just throw something in there and say, okie dokie. That's the kid being thrown in the pool. Right. But one thing we do here, and I'll talk about this next Sunday in our 4th of July, working with animals through the 4th of July, is keeping your animals used to change. Right here, if I were to walk out to the center and go 1, 2, you're going to see all animals come up on alert, as in a good way. Something's getting ready to happen. I don't know what it is, but and I do that on purpose. Something is going to happen on the count of 3. You don't know what it is, but be prepared, because if I don't put the unexpected on cue, mm-hmm. that unexpected is going to happen, and it's going to have a consequence that I may not like. So I train them 1, 2, 3. Something's going to happen on 3. You don't know if it's going to be a nail gun shooting a nail into the wood. You don't know if it's going to be a firework. You don't know if it's just going to be me tossing a ball in the air. But then whatever, they know to watch, something's getting ready to happen, and then I just deliver the mother load of positive reinforcers after whatever it is introduced.
I like that concept a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. It started with birds, and then it just transferred to all the animals. Because, like you and I were talking about, using environmental events to control behavior, that space that you shaped with the dog, your client's dog, in the backyard. A lot of times we can't control our environment. Our environment is out of control. So you need to get that under as much control as you possibly can. It's not being a control freak. It's behaviors getting ready to be learned. Are you ready? Is it what you want? Is it what the animal wants? So I need to get that environment under as much control as possible. And that's how I do the 1, 2, 3 in an uncontrollable environment. That's my bit of control. And I do that a lot with the fireworks. Yeah. So in identifying aversives, there's an article I wrote. I think I wrote it for PPG, using curiosity as a reinforcer. Mm-hmm. A lot of times when people can easily punish curiosity, we had Kronos, the African pied crow here, Pocahontas, the African crested porcupine. I would look at them and I'm like, am I seeing curiosity? Am I seeing fear? What am I looking at? So I just sit back and watch their behavior, the behaviors that they're giving. But the more, if I would see and that's where enrichment comes into play. Curiosity and enrichment. Keep that enrichment changing. And enrichment is so much more than just toys. But once you have a curiosity, this was with the giraffe. I was like, this is a very curious animal. We've got the whole world as far as training in front of us if I see a curious animal. And many times people will punish that curiosity by, oh, you think this is interesting? Here, have it. Boom, positive punisher. That curiosity was just the pace at which you moved it was a positive punisher for the animal, and now you have an object that the animal's fearful of.
See that a lot with young animals, especially puppies. And I think that people who have puppies sometimes will push too much on the puppy. They show some interest and some curiosity, and then they push it on them, and then it's too much. And people say, I don't understand. I've had this dog since it was 6 weeks of age, and I don't understand why my dog behaves this way. The dog's fearful of certain things, growing up into adolescence. And
starts becoming really reactive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's exactly, what you're talking about right there, is that curiosity is punished, essentially. Yeah.
And that's what you and I were talking about at the beginning of the live stream. Oh, here, I want you to do this because this is what I want you to do. This is what dogs do.
Right.
You know, dogs need to ride in cars. Dogs need to go to parades. That's a big one for me. I was just like, you go to a parade, I'm just like, oh my gosh. And you'll see everybody watching here, go to a parade. Go to a parade and watch all the dogs that are there and identify that behavior.
I think the problem is that so many people do not know how to identify it. They don't know what they're seeing, not just with dogs, but in all sorts of animals. They don't know how to recognize stress. I think that there's the obvious that, you know, the general public knows. I see it, you know, people share these bird videos all the time of, you know, birds doing these funny, you know, physical movements.
Funny to us.
Right. But really what that is stress in that bird. But these people who are passing these videos around, you know, social media, they don't understand that animal is actually quite stressed. And so people don't know they have a problem with their animal because they're not even recognizing it, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah. With you saying that, I just thought of some. Oh, I know I was going to ask you or say, because this happens to me, and it even happens with an animal I'm very familiar with. What do you do with an animal where you're like, I do not know what that means? I've never seen that before. I don't know what you're trying to show. I don't understand that behavior. I know a lot of times, because this had just happened the other day. Well, it happened at the zoo where I was just like, whoa, I don't know what that means. It happened the other day when I had the turkey vulture, Willie, that's here for training from Nature's Nursery. She was on my glove and she showed a behavior and I was just like, I don't know what that means. I haven't seen that before. So what I did was I just stopped. I stopped moving. She stuck her neck out. She was looking in a certain direction, but she was doing something else that made me think, I've never seen this before. I don't know what that is. So I just turn her to whatever she's looking at so she can get a clearer view, because she showed me that she was interested in seeing by sticking her neck out. So I let her get a clearer view. I wasn't going to take another step towards whatever it was because I didn't know what it was. But one thing I will do is I just stop. And if I have to, if the animal's on me, I get it off of me. My screen just froze for whatever reason. Okay. So, I mean, that's what I do is I just stop until I get a better understanding of what I'm looking at, because it may not be a potential aversive, but it might be, and I don't want it paired with me.
Right.
And especially working with some of the exotics that I work with, I could get injured really fast if I do not understand. What do you do? I mean, is that something you see in your field of work?
Yeah, well, I do, especially with animals I haven't worked with before. Like you said, you know, you don't know what that, you know, little raise of the eyebrow is, or that little sound that they make. But another thing that I do, in addition to just observing, is, you know, I ask myself, I try to put myself into the animal's head. And I know that I'm never going to be getting it right 100% at the time. But what purpose does that behavior serve for the animal? If I don't know what it is, and I look at what's happening in the environment and how does that animal possibly think their behavior is impacting the environment, what purpose does it serve? And so that helps me to see how I can then set up the environment to either maintain that behavior if it's something I want, or get rid of it. Like you're saying, you know, you don't want to get bit by the, you know, turkey vulture on your arm. So you want him to either leave, or, you know, you need to figure out what's happening in the environment so you can make that potentially dangerous situation not happen.
Right.
Yeah, so behavior always serves a purpose for the animal. They don't do something just for the sake of doing it. So that's a big one, I think, for people to really stand back and try to understand their animal that they're with, and see what purpose their behavior is serving, especially with problem behaviors. I think that people think about how it impacts them. It's a problem for them, but is this a problem for your animal? That's the bigger question to be asking. Why is your animal behaving that way in the first place? So, your animal probably has a problem that you need to address for the animal. Yeah.
Yeah. And when those problems or those behaviors aren't read accurately, then a lot of times will see people say, well, I don't understand. I don't understand. I can't do anything with this. Boom. And the animal is given to a shelter.
Right. How do I correct it? I got asked that question yesterday, and it's one I get asked a lot. So when this undesired behavior happens, how do I correct it? And my answer is always, you don't. You don't correct it. You set it up so that the animal doesn't feel that they need to act that way in the first place. And then if needed, you can teach them a different behavior. A simple one, this particular dog doesn't like to be approached when he's in she's in her crate. And I watched, she was in her crate and her little feet were plopped out the edge of it, and the pet parent went by and went to reach her hand down, and you saw the dog's body language, very kind of fearful, the ears went back, concerned look on the face. And she, the mom didn't continue to pet, but I asked her, did you see that behavior? And she goes, yes, I don't understand it. I don't understand why she acts that way. And it's like, but do you understand what she's telling you? And yes, I understand that she doesn't want me to approach. And so every time you walk by the crate, why don't you drop a little treat in the crate? So she sees your approach then as something that she welcomes rather than is fearful of. Yeah. And that's how you correct it. That's how you solve the problem, is change how the animal perceives you in that situation. And, but a lot of times, in companion animals, it's a bunch of no, telling the animal, you may not behave that way. And they will be speaking Greek, to their animal, because they just don't understand that. It has no meaning to them. And so then they're just damaging that relationship between the human and the animal, when that's the method for trying to change the problem behavior.
Yeah. And one thing we don't say here is no. And the reason is because you tell an animal what not to do without telling it what to do, depending on the animal, you could be putting that causes frustration. It can cause anxiety. It's paired with you. Depending on the animal that you're telling no. With me, a lot of the zoo animals, I tell some of these no, it's going to result in me getting hurt really fast.
One, I had to move a bear from its enclosure into like a trailer to move the bear. And so it was a written assignment. I had to write down all the steps of how I would do this. And so I submitted it, and Nan Arthur wrote me an email back, and she basically said, Kim, do you like your arm? Because basically the way that you've set this up is unsafe, and you have to be able to move this animal without any sort of contact, right? And that was such a huge lesson for me in thinking outside of the companion animal world and how we train, that I've used those techniques or that thought process and mentality with companion animals, because I still get bitten by a dog feet. And so I approach every animal as if they're a lion, a tiger, or a bear. I give them that space that they need. I'm waiting for that body language that gives me permission to proceed with the animal. Like that dog in the crate, that dog was not giving permission. That dog was saying, stop. And the problem that this family is having is that they weren't stopping, and then the dog was speaking louder. Okay, now the dog's growling, right? So I think it's really important for, we talk about connecting the dots, that when we work with companion animals, using these principles that like you use with the exotics and others use in zoos and other places, rehab, wildlife centers, that they apply to our companion animals so much. And if we give the care and consideration and how we approach behavior modification with companion animals the same way that we do with exotics, I think our companion animals would be so much better off.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, with that being said, Kim, we're up on our hour. We're actually over, but I could sit here and talk to you forever about this. I mean, I'd love to have you back on for a future discussion. Okay, great. Yeah. So, Kim, I just want to put up here, how do people get in touch with you if they need to get in touch with you?
My website is buildingbondstraining.com. There it is on the screen.
Yep.
And my email is the best way to contact me. You can contact me through the website, or you can email me at info@buildingbondstraining.com.
Okay, great. Well, let's plan on, I'll get in touch with you after this live stream, and let's plan on another time for you to come on.
Oh.
Okay, great. Well, I hope to see you at another Pet Professional Guild event.
If it's in Kanab, I'm going to be there.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to say a couple of things before we end. Don't forget, Deb Jones and I have this workshop coming up the second weekend in October. This is All Species Animal and Training workshop. It's going to be a 2-day workshop given by myself and Deb Jones, who is a psychologist, professional, well-known international dog trainer, and also instructor at Finzi Dog Sports Academy. So that's coming up the second weekend in October. Also, a couple other things. Next week on Coffee with the Critters, we are going to be discussing preparing our animals for the 4th of July. And I will be sharing with you several different things that we do here and things you can do throughout the year, things you can do on the day, things you can do at that time. Don't forget, you can look for all of our upcoming Coffee with the Critters right here to the left on this page. And in less than an hour, I am going to be having a phone discussion with the executive director, Bonnie Zimmerman, of the Indonesian Parrot Project. She just got back from Budapest, and she has very important information she wants to speak to me about. And I've already talked to her about bringing some information to you guys via live stream. So with that being said, we will see you next Sunday at 9 a.m. on Coffee with the Critters. Okay? Kim, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And I'll be in touch.
All right.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you for joining.